So, Black History Month is some bullshit. And today I wanted to talk about why I feel as though Black History Month is some bullshit. To disclaim, I am in the United States, so I'm speaking purely from a US perspective. So, yeah, my first point is that Black History Month has become extremely whitewashed. Extremely whitewashed. It's all about white comfort. There are a lot of Black revolutionaries in the United States who have been murdered or jailed or banished or silenced, who are either ignored or entirely stripped of their entire ideology. Using Martin Luther King as an example, what is the first speech that we hear? Come February 1st. Come February 1st. What's the first speech we all hear? Come together, class. It's the I have a dream speech. Yes, all together. Exactly. It's the I have a dream speech by Martin Luther King. You will see this on CNN. You will see this on Fox News. You will see this on people's timelines. And you will see quotes from that speech taken out of context, or you'll see them just entirely ignored or erased. In the I Have a Dream speech, white people's favorite thing from the I Have a Dream speech is, I want my children to be judged by the content of their character and not the color of their skin. Right? Like, that's a quote. We see this constantly. Even outside of like Black History Month. We see this all the time. And at this point, frankly, it's propaganda. It's propaganda because this is the reality of Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King was becoming more radical. And one of his contemporaries, Malcolm X, was much more focused on direct action, more radical thought, socialist thought, blah, blah, blah. And Martin Luther King was slowly getting to that point. He had taken off those blinders and was learning more and more and more. And a thing that he said is that he feared he was integrating his people, Black people, into a burning house. But, I mean, you don't hear about that during Black History Month. You don't hear about that. You hear that he wants his children to be judged by the content of their character and blah, blah, blah. But the reason that Martin Luther King was murdered, because that's what happened. He was murdered. That's what happened. And that's not spoken about during Black History Month either. He was murdered by white supremacists and the government. He was murdered. So what you don't hear from Martin Luther King is that he was afraid that integration for Black people wasn't necessarily the best move because white supremacy is so all-encompassing in the United States to the point of it being a detriment to Black people and colonized people and non-Black people of color as a whole. But you don't hear that. All you hear is content of their character, and that's all that people care about during Black History Month. Another icon, another leader that has been whitewashed is Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman went out of her way to bring Black slaves to liberation, and she went back and back and back and back multiple times, risking her life, risking everyone's lives who went with her. She was afraid and she was scared, and she did this work regardless, because if she had not done it, there would be so few free people as her contemporaries. She did this work. She was risking her life. And that's not what's taken into account. It's not taken into account the fact that she would have been chased by dogs. She would have been chased by fucking racist ass gun wielding creeps who wanted to slaughter her for the absolute crime of not wanting to be a slave anymore. She didn't think about the idea that maybe she would have been killed for breaking into these white people's quote unquote property and stealing their quote unquote property that is black people and getting them to liberation. That's never highlighted. What's highlighted is that she set people free, and so she needs to be venerated, which is cute. I mean, it's cute, whatever. It's topical, it's superficial. Another one of our many leaders as Black revolutionaries is Malcolm X, and he's unfairly demonized because his work was focused a lot on direct action. He didn't give a fuck about being non-confrontational. He didn't give a shit about that. He cared about getting Black people free, whatever the fuck that meant. Whatever it meant. If it means arming people, if it means fighting back against an imperialist white supremacist state, then that's what he was for. Because he was a revolutionary. And Malcolm X is hugely, hugely demonized. You don't hear shit about Malcolm X come Black History Month. February 1st, oh baby, who is the first person that you hearing about? It's Martin fucking Luther King. And fine, okay, his work was important and the work that he did was very important. But you don't hear about his contemporary Malcolm X. As a matter of fact, Malcolm X is an afterthought. He's a footnote. And nobody talks about the fact that he was murdered. None of the above. Nobody talks about his work during Black History Month. When I say nobody, I'm referring to the media. You don't listen to a whole bunch of speeches that he did. You don't get a whole bunch of quotes from him. You don't get a whole bunch of profiles on his life and his work. None of that. He is essentially ignored during Black History Month, which is a major disservice. Major disservice. He's entirely erased. And it goes to follow. It goes to follow that Fred Hampton would be just as easily ignored and swept under the rug, because Fred Hampton wasn't going with this bullshit either. Fred Hampton was a revolutionary. Fred Hampton was a socialist. Fred Hampton was working with multiple different people of color, multiple different organizations of people of color who were trying to enact revolution right the fuck now. That's what happened. He was 21 when he was murdered. He was murdered by the goddamn CIA. He was killed. That's what happened. He's not even mentioned. He's not even a footnote at this point. He's entirely, completely erased from Black History Month. And he is Black, and he is a major part of Black history. And he's entirely ignored. Why is that? Why is that? Why is it that our leaders, our Black leaders, have been entirely erased from the record of Black history? Why have their names been scrubbed from the roster of Black history? Why? But I mean, we all know why. We all know why. It's because his work wasn't palatable to a white audience. His work made white people uncomfortable. Malcolm X as well. His work made people uncomfortable. White people uncomfortable. It made them uncomfortable. It made them feel as though they needed to take accountability for once. And white folks don't like that. So they erased him. Black people, frankly, across the diaspora, not even just in the United States, but Black people as a whole across the diaspora, still have not gained humanization behind our radicalization. We haven't done. Nat Turner is demonized. Fred Hampton is demonized. Multiple different Black leaders, Black revolutionary leaders have been demonized behind their work as revolutionaries. They just have been. Because it makes white people uncomfortable, and somehow that's our goddamn problem during fucking Black History Month. Like, are you serious? This is our month. This is our month where we're supposed to be able to celebrate ourselves and our accomplishments and the accomplishments of our ancestors, and you're not even giving us that space because it makes you quake in your boots a little bit. Like, child, I'll be damned. Black leaders have historically been jailed, murdered, exiled, tortured behind their radicalization. It's always been thus. It has always been thus. And that's why it's so hard to get Black people to radicalize as a whole, because it's scary. We know what the state will do to us if we decide to get loud, if we decide to get angry. We've seen it. We all saw what the fuck happened to Assata Shakur. We all saw what happened to her. She got banished. And frankly, had she not been banished, she would either have been jailed for life or murdered on the spot. And that's the truth. She got lucky. She got lucky. Because Fred Hampton wasn't lucky. Martin Luther King wasn't lucky. They were murdered. By the state. By the government. They were murdered. At this point, Black History Month isn't even about us anymore. It's not about Black people. It's about what I personally call the theater of inclusivity. What is theater of inclusivity? What does that mean? When I say theater of inclusivity, I mean white people enjoy the idea that they're inclusive and they recognize diverse viewpoints. But it's only up to a point. It's only ever up to a point. It's only up to the point at which it makes them uncomfortable. Right? So when we say Black History Month, when we talk about Black revolutionaries, who is the first person that white people reach for? It's Martin Luther King, right? But they don't know anything about Martin Luther King at all, because Martin Luther King was leaning further and further into Malcolm X's ideology, and that's what got him killed. That's why he was murdered, because he was becoming more and more radical, more and more angry, and that was a problem for white people. So they killed him. Simple as. They sent him letters telling him to kill himself. They sent him letters blackmailing him. They sent him threats. He got shot. His house got shot at. His family got shot at. He was shot at when he was doing his speeches and his demonstrations and all of this. All of this happened, and this is at the hands of white people. The same people who like to act as though it's okay for them to make Black History Month doodles on fucking Google. Or the same people who like to act like it's okay for them to post stupid ass screen caps of Martin Luther King's words on Facebook during February. Like, it's ridiculous. It's disrespectful and it's ridiculous. It's the theater of inclusivity. White people don't give a fuck about inclusivity. They never have done. They give a fuck about their egos. And they give a fuck about their comfort. And for a race that has, in the United States, always been at the top, I can understand how criticism would be a problem for them. That does not absolve them of the fact that this bullshit is racist as shit. It's racist. Sorry, if you hear my cat, y'all know I have a cat. That's Juno. He's loud. He has a lot to say tonight, as per usual. White people love the idea of being more inclusive more than they love the actual act of being inclusive. Because being inclusive as a whole, like what it means to be inclusive, means that white people aren't centered for once. And that's a problem for them. Move, Juno. And they also hate being called racist. They hate being called racist. And that's everybody else's problem. White people hate being called racist. They hate it with a passion. They act like it's a hate crime or something for them to be called out on their bullshit, racist, white supremacist ass behavior. They would rather just give crumbs or pieces or shards of acknowledgement to the people that they oppress than to do that work and unpack. Because unpacking is work. Like, they don't want to put forth that effort. They don't want to put forth that work. And so they give us something like Black History Month, and they venerate a bastardized, whitewashed, consumable version of Martin Luther King and act as though they're not racist because they voted for Obama. Truly celebrating Black History Month in the States means celebrating those revolutionaries. It means celebrating Fred Hampton. It means celebrating Assata. It means celebrating Martin Luther King in his later stages. It means celebrating Malcolm X. It means celebrating these people who made white people uncomfortable. Because that's actual Black history in the US. That's Black history. Our history has always been revolutionary. And a white supremacist, racist ass state murdering our leaders doesn't change that. We've always been communists. We've always been socialists. We've always been anarchists. Our leaders have always been this loud, this angry, this ready to go to blows. Like, it's always been this way. And to pretend that that's not the case does a major disservice, not just to Black people, but to white people as well, because you're not being told the entire story. Our existence as Black people is revolutionary. Our existence is disruptive. That's how it's always been, because we live in a racist state. Right? So it would go to follow that the simple fact that we choose to live unapologetically is going to be a problem for the state that we occupy. And frankly, I'm going to just be honest. If you want me to give a fuck about Black History Month, you're going to have to put forth that effort to venerate Black revolutionaries as well. Not just the ones that make white people comfortable, but the ones that call them to the carpet on their bullshit as well. Assata Shakur, she killed a cop. A cop that came to their demonstrations. What was she? Was a Black Panther, I think. She was a Black Panther, and she killed a cop who was shooting at her and gave her all kinds of hell and all of this extra shit. And before she was indicted, she left the country. That's what happened. Now, I personally am not going out of my way to incite violence against cops or white people or whatever, because that's ineffectual to me. But I'm going to say that there is a very valid history behind Black anger. And for Black anger to be as heavily demonized as it is there's no cause. There's no cause for it. There's no cause for it to be as heavily demonized as it is. If black anger causes you to demonize an entire race behind one dead cop, that's what it takes? Oh, baby, there's a problem. It's disproportionate. It's disproportionate and it's irrational. It's irrational. In conclusion, Black History Month, for me, is 24/7, 365. Because I am black regardless. My blackness isn't dependent on white recognition. I don't give a fuck if my blackness is palatable for white people. None of us owe white people comfort or peace or ease in our existence. We have nothing as black people to apologize for at all. We just don't. We don't. To insinuate anything other than that is absolutely ludicrous. It makes no sense. What the fuck would we apologize for? Quite frankly, in the United States, we didn't ask to be over here in the first place. We were brought over here. Black people were brought out of our home over here so that we could do the work that white people were too lazy to do. They actively chose to sit on their asses for centuries. And that's somehow black people's problem. Bitch, I'll be damned. Hell no. Hell no. I don't owe no apologies as a black person. No black person owes any apologies. Period. We have a right to be angry that we are brutalized and tokenized and terrorized under this white supremacist capitalist state. And to give us the shortest month of the year, to give us pats on the ass and act as though that's somehow acceptable it's a slap in the face. It is. It's a slap in the face. Because black people deserve more. We deserve reparations. We deserve equity. We deserve a voice. We deserve representation. We deserve all of that. Because doesn't everybody, not even just black people, but doesn't everybody, every person of color, don't we all deserve that? Don't we all deserve equity under this bullshit state? We all deserve that. To pretend that we don't is inhumane. It's inhumane. It's disgusting, monstrous fucking behavior. It's monstrous. Until such time as black revolutionaries are held up to the same standard or they're given the same visibility, I guess, as Rosa Parks or Martin Luther King or Harriet Tubman or whatever of the other like 3 black people that we get visibility for during Black History Month, until such time as black people, black revolutionaries as a whole are given that same recognition, Black History Month is always going to be a mockery of black people. It's always going to be a slap in the face. It's always going to be a slap in the face. Because black history as a whole is so rich and it's so filled with so much revolutionary action, so much revolutionary thought. Black men, black women, black mages, black children even, who have gone out of their way to do this work, even up until now in 2020, who have gone out of their way. And the only person that you care about is the guy who said, I have a dream once? No. Black history is more colorful than that. It's more deep than that. It has more depth than that. To reduce blackness as a whole in the United States to some whitewashed, out of context bullshit caricature of Martin Luther King is disrespectful. And it happens every single year. Every single year. It happens. February 1st, white people come out of their way to be like, oh, well, I have a dream too. Content of their character. Me too. I agree with that, Martin. No. No. Black people are more than just the bullshit ass mascot that the Hulists have determined is their favorite for Black History Month for the past decade or whatever. Fuck that speech. Fuck him being taken out of context. White people don't want to talk about the fact that Martin Luther King was getting sick of y'all's bullshit too. And he said it, and that's why he was murdered. You want to talk about Black history? Talk about it in every single facet. Every facet. And if you refuse to, then you don't give a shit about Black history. You give a fuck about stroking your ego. You give a fuck about being comfortable. And for Black people in the United States, our history has never been comfortable. So fuck your comfort. Tell the stories for real, or shut the fuck up.